From the farms of Delaware, it's the Talking Yu-Gi-Oh! Show, and welcome back to episode 11. We've got a great show for you guys tonight. I've got something that I want to talk about, and it's more kind of on the concern side. It's more on a little bit of a negative side, which is kind of, rarer here on the channel. One of the things that people, I think, have wanted for a very long time, I would argue that in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime space, it's something that I have seen probably the most of consistently for about 10 years now. And that is a Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga to anime one-to-one adaptation. The same exact thing that happened in the manga being animated for a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. This is something that has been talked about and has been yearned for a very, very long time. When we talk Yu-Gi-Oh! Reboot, this is something that Yu-Gi-Oh! Reboot could certainly mean. It could certainly mean a one-to-one adaptation, taking the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga and making it a brand new anime. For those of you that don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, very heavily based on the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, is not a one-to-one adaptation. There's plenty of filler. There are plenty of different decisions. Keeping Pegasus alive is a big one. The Mai Marik duel, totally different in the anime than it was in the original manga, much more toned down. So it is certainly based off of the original manga, but it is not a one-to-one adaptation. I am referring to a one-to-one adaptation from the start of the manga, early Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, which was not even dueling. It was not even playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Remember, Yu-Gi-Oh! In the early manga was supposed to just mean a bunch of different games. The card game is what people would write into Shonen Jump a lot about, and the card game is what they really, really ran with. I'm going to give you a little bit of a Yusaku styling here. I have three big concerns when it comes to this idea, why I think it's a bad idea, and why I think it really just doesn't make a lot of sense. And the first thing that we are going to look at in terms of concerns that I have and reasons is the obvious one. And, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, but it's the obvious card game / sales problem. We have talked about a lot on this channel how the main purpose of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime is to sell product, right? It's to get people into the game. It's to sell cards. I don't think a one-to-one adaptation from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga to a brand new anime would have any effect on the selling of card games, because the game was totally different for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga than where it is now, even for Yu-Gi-Oh! DM. And by the way, there is a lot of arcs in the original manga that have nothing to do with dueling. The only arc really is Battle City. Think about it. Duelist Kingdom, it just doesn't have rules. Millennium World really doesn't have duels. And then all of the stuff before Duelist Kingdom, there's no dueling. So is that going to get people that are fans of the TCG, people that are fans of the OCG, watching a product like this? I really don't think that it would. And I think that's why a one-to-one adaptation doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to talk about, hey, we got to move product from the warehouse, right? The picture you're seeing, it's a warehouse in 5Ds. People want their Yu-Gi-Oh! Product. Konami wants an anime to move their Yu-Gi-Oh! Product. We've got to move product. What if we update the duels? Well, now all of a sudden it's not a one-to-one adaptation. I'm not fully opposed to updating the duels to make them a little more modern, or even maybe have some different dueling results. But if you're going to just take the manga and adapt it to an anime style, I think this is probably the biggest reason as to why it would never happen from a logistics standpoint. Reason number two, and this is something that I think gets overlooked a lot, the difficultness of drawing in Kazuki Takahashi's style. Kazuki Takahashi had one of the most unique and incredible drawing styles we have maybe ever seen across the entire platform of manga, across the entire platform of anime, that was extremely difficult to do. With how difficult it is to, on a week in and week out basis, draw a really, really exquisite styling that Yu-Gi-Oh! Brought, I think it would be a huge challenge. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to play a clip that I did from a video 5 years ago. Ebina, one of the greatest Yu-Gi-Oh! Animators that ever worked on the product. Zexal Arc 5, I'm sure you guys have heard of him. he had a couple of thoughts when Yu-Gi-Oh! Switched from Gallop to Bridge, and the 7's stylings were, of course, much more simplistic, easier, and cheaper to draw, by the way. This is what Ebona had to say, and I think it's really, really interesting. Want to play it and share it with you guys.
But if you don't believe me, at least believe Ebona. Ebona is one of the best animators that has worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! He worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! During Zexal. He worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! During Arc 5. I believe he left after Arc 5 ended. And this is what Ebona had to say, the animator, when he saw the character designs for Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. So in 2 different tweets, Ebona basically says, of course, with a new studio and staff, you're going to have new designs. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is notoriously difficult to properly ape. The only reason it's stuck with the current aesthetic is Takahashi gave the baseline for up to Zexal, Miyoshi did Arc 5, and Hara did Vrains, and was able to replicate the feel of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Because he had worked on most, if not every single series, and now, as we know, the character designer for Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s is the same character designer that did Sailor Moon, someone that has not been associated with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise like a Miyoshi or a Hara, or of course, Kazuki Takahashi, the man who created it. And ape, for those that don't know, basically just means to imitate, to mimic, to do an impression of. And so, Ebona is basically just saying here that it's very commonly known that in the anime industry, it is very difficult to properly draw and consistently draw in the style of Yu-Gi-Oh! And
Again, if you don't want to take it from me, take it from one of the, I would argue, greatest animators that ever worked on the property. That was his reaction right after the art style of 7s was shown. Animation is so expensive these days. And Takahashi, tragically, no longer with us. I don't think we are ever going to get a Yu-Gi-Oh! Again that is going to imitate the style of Yu-Gi-Oh! DM through Vrains, especially one that's going to be weekly. Even seasonal, I think, is a stretch. So I don't have any faith that an adaptation like this would look good. I mean, you've got to look at some of the clips we got from Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters back in the early... This is real, by the way. This is not edited. This is a real clip of Seto Kaiba, and you can find plenty of these scattered throughout DM. Okay, and this is when animation was much cheaper. Not that it was cheap, but much cheaper. This style of Yu-Gi-Oh! And a thought that a Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga one-to-one adaptation to an anime, weekly or seasonal, is going to look beautiful. It's going to look crisp. It's going to look incredible. They'd have to spend millions might be an understatement. Hundreds of millions, tens of millions of dollars to make it look as good as, you know, you would want it to, and to emulate what is known to be in the industry a very, very difficult styling. And then my third and final reason, and I think this is something that a lot of people overlook, it would lack an element that every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Series has had. And what do I mean by that? Unpredictability. I think in today's day and age, discussions, theorizing, talking about with friends, with community members, whether it's Reddit, whether it's Twitter, whether it's whatever, about predicting what's going to come next would totally be devoid and pointless in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga one-to-one anime adaptation. We know everything that's going to happen, right? You've read the manga. In fact, we've seen the duels. Most of the duels, by the way, are like 95 or higher % accurately adapted in the Duel Monsters anime. So if you want to watch Yugi versus Kaiba or Joey versus Marek, most of those duels are very, very accurate to the original manga. You can already experience them in the DM anime. So I just think this idea of a one-to-one manga adaptation for Yu-Gi-Oh!, which would be, at a time, I think would have been really cool, just doesn't make sense. Obviously, from the lack of card sales, I think that's probably the most logistically difficult thing to justify it. But then I think from the element of difficultness to emulate that style, I don't think we're ever going to get a Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime in that old Kazuki Takahashi styling again. I just don't. If we get Yu-Gi-Oh! 9, and if we get a Master Rule anime again, which I hope we do, it's going to look more like 7s and Go Rush than DM through Vrains. I think people have this false equivalency that if we get a Master Rule show, it'll automatically look like the Gallop Yu-Gi-Ohs. I think those days very well are behind us. But I want to bring in some guys here. I want to bring in my friends. Obviously, they're very close with the show as well. They're very close with the manga. All right, well, Nick T, listen, I'm going to start with you. I know you have not read the original manga, but you've seen most of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. And listen, we're just talking about it as a concept. This is something that I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans really want. I have major trepidations with it, as I just laid out. I would love to know your honest thoughts, my friend.
I think I disagree with your take. And again, all of my arguments come from a place of not having read the manga, and actually that is why I'm able to sort of argue one of the points, and that's unpredictability. I think there's a solid portion of the fan base who maybe just play the card game, just have watched the anime, that wouldn't know exactly what is going on had they not read the manga. So like, yes, you can't hold it to task because you haven't read the manga, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy something that is a new type of adaptation, on a previously loved IP. So like, and I'd be like, yeah, maybe this is anecdotal, but like myself, if I went into it not having read the manga, I would still not necessarily know what's going on, or not know what will happen. And I think that, that may be the case for many people.
That's fair. I think just to say one thing, Nick T, I think when we get up to Duelist Kingdom, in this hypothetical adaptation, I think the story beats in Duelist Kingdom, Battle City, maybe not Millennium World, but Duelist Kingdom and Battle City are identical. So I think even if you haven't read the manga, if you've watched the DM anime, Duelist Kingdom and Battle City, sure, there's going to be little changes here. Oh, Pegasus got killed. But the major story beats are the same, in my opinion.
Okay, I mean, and that makes sense, but like, I might use like another IP as a sort of parallel and example, and that is, yes, this is slightly different because it's an unabridged version, but like Dragon Ball. Mm-hmm. Putting out Dragon Ball Kai, which is essentially Dragon Ball Z, same beats, but like the filler is cut and there are a couple changes. Yet it was fairly successful in getting, another era of watchers into Dragon Ball prior to then, leading into Super. So I think this would be a case of, yes, maybe there isn't like a subsequent series to lead into, but this might be another chance for people to fall in love with a series that they had not yet dipped their toes into, and then a sort of retelling of a story that people have already seen.
That's fair. And I will go on record and say this. I am open to involving the original cast. I think this is actually a very unpopular take. I am open to that. I just don't want it to be a one-to-one manga to anime reboot. I mean, what about the whole element of selling new product, though?
That element I can't argue, actually. That one that's a very fair point.
Dak, you are coming from the perspective of someone that has read the original manga. You've also obviously watched the DM anime. I'd love to know your thoughts. I mean, are you kind of agreeing with me, agreeing with Nick T, a little mix of both? What do you think, man?
I mean, I'd say definitely a little bit of both. I can see where it would be cool to have. I can, especially, for like a big old 30th anniversary project or something like that. It would work pretty well. You have definitely a lot of key elements. Dragon Ball Z, Kai was going to be one of my main points there, is that is something that worked. It was successful. I don't care. That's the beauty. We're on the same wavelength. It worked well. One Piece is even doing it now. They are doing a remake kind of idea for One Piece, going back through and fixing pacing and removing some of the filler and stuff like that to kind of retell the series a little bit closer to the manga. And then of course, in terms of products, I mean, definitely there's a lot of stuff they could be selling and marketing. It might not all be card game specific, but I mean, they could easily make variants of all the different games that he does in the Season 0 era of the story. Dungeon Dice Monsters could get a physical board game relaunch. They had that back in the early 2000s when that came out. So they could easily do stuff like that. They could easily do, like they've done countless times and people have bought every single time, special new versions, new artworks, new rarities and printings of all of these classic monsters. Or you just add a little bit on the end of each episode of, you like the, Weevil's insect deck. Well, here's some more types of cards that you can use to modify and amplify that deck for the modern day. And they could easily have, a 2-minute little segment that shows how you can make it more competitive at the end of the episode. So there are ways to still kind of keep it in that competitive realm, showcase new features, have new packs, have new expansions, and really with all of those types, it's a way to bring those deck types new support without having to necessarily animate them specifically. If you're like, hey, here's Red Eyes, you love Red Eyes? Check out this pack that's got Red Eye support, and then you launch a couple new Red Eyes cards, you tease a couple at the end, and boom, people say, oh, I love Red Eyes, and they go out and buy the packs to try to get it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's fair points.
This is something sellable right now, at least, and marketable. Is nostalgia. Nostalgia sells, and even if this isn't exact DM, this is a shiny new version of something that people grew up on. And that is appealing. That sells. Even if it doesn't work, it sells.
But Nick D, don't you think it would be more beneficial if it was just an alternate story to the original, manga DM anime? Same characters, but the decks are all upgraded, and the viewer doesn't know exactly what's going to happen in each duel.
I'm actually kind of seeing now the specifics of this point, because you're arguing 1-to-1.
Correct.
And I think to that point, yeah, I actually think some modifications for the modern era, especially as it pertains to card game players who may be tuning in, updates would be acceptable and not tarnishing any legacy. I don't think. I think that manga was written for that time, and if they're going to put money into it now, maybe some updates, would be necessary, especially for the card game players.
Right.
So yeah, okay, I can concede on that. I think maybe 1-to-1 wouldn't necessarily work, but I think some modern tweaks would be necessary. Sure.
Okay. Yeah. I just think in this day and age, especially with how the DM anime was, I just think a direct adaptation would not be all that appealing. I think there's a lot of cooler things they could do for that DM cast, which could include, again, just updating the cards. I mean, I think, while that wouldn't be my favorite thing in the world if it was just that, because I would love to see some different story beats, so you still have that theorizing, you still have that speculation, you still have that, man, I don't know how this duel is going to play out, which is something that has existed in every Yu-Gi-Oh, by the way. I really think people overlook that, including Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. DM, even if you read the manga, you didn't know what was happening in the virtual world. You didn't know how Doma was going to play out. You didn't know how the KC Grand Prix was going to play out. Every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime has had that speculative approach where you as the viewer at some point or another do not know what's happening next. You would not have that with a project like this. And I think that is something that would take a little bit of the enjoyment out of it. And I think maybe I'm alone on that, but I think some people overlook that for sure. You just watched one of the clips from my Talking Yu-Gi-Oh! Show, which airs every other Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you guys so much for your support. Please leave all your thoughts down below. Long live Yu-Gi-Oh! And I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.
Wow.